You said the studio has only like 7 seconds to convince an audience of their USP.
You just played a really, really cool game. You want to convince your best schoolyard friend as well of this game to play it. What would you tell them?
So why was No Man's Sky considered empty at launch despite having like virtually limitless planets, and then GTA is gonna feel full with just one city?
They thought like, wow, there's so huge trillions of planets. I can just go anywhere, do whatever I want.
You described monetization as a like sponge with a high surface area. So how can like developers build?
Wait, give me one moment. I got something for you.
Sponge. So you
have an extra sponge. Yeah,
nice.
maybe I even have water here. So
nice.
What happens now? When I put this here, my pants are wet. That's what happens.
You're listening to Game Dev Epic Fails by Ludo Launchpad, the podcast where we dig into the biggest struggles and the hardest lessons behind the games we love. I'm your host, Jet Tanyag. Today's guest is Patrick Rose, a product strategy, retention, and monetization expert. He's an independent consultant who's worked on franchises like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, and The Witcher. He helped hundreds of studios figure out why their games aren't performing and how to turn them into games that players will love and also pay for. In this episode, we dig into the fatal flaws of a $40 million free-to-play failure, why Sony's Concord was a strategic disaster before the first trailer even dropped. We also talk about money sponge mechanics that put million-dollar hits at the top of the charts. This is easily one of the best conversations I've had on video game marketing, business, and the different strategies on how to make games successful. It packs a ton of takeaways to help you point your games in the right direction. So without further ado, here is Patrick Rose. Hello, today we have Patrick Rose on the show. Hi, Patrick. So welcome to the show.
Hi, hi everyone. Yeah, happy to be here.
All right. So let's start off about your career, your story first. And I'd like to ask about how did you get into the industry? So how did you begin, like from business and law and HR as an intern in Hamburg, and then you pivoted to a full-time games researcher and in just 5 months? So yeah, tell us about that story.
Yeah, I had a very funny start, I guess, into the games industry as an HR intern at the games company. That is an important thing. Free to play games company. The thing is, I was studying HR management and business law, right? And I never thought I could ever work for games industry. I never had that perspective in the small town I lived at that time in Germany. Even though I always loved games, I never thought I could actually work with games. However, then at some point it was a really difficult job market, and I already had HR jobs before that, but I couldn't find a proper HR job at that time. So the only thing I could do is start working as an HR intern again. So doing a step back even. And in my HR life and in college, I learned a lot about psychology, human psychology as well, which would be a benefit later on in the games company. When I was working there, I thought like, at least I can somewhat closely work with the games, which was nice, even though I was only an HR intern. And then they opened that special role, which was games researcher. They needed a cheap games researcher, someone who plays games, deconstructs them, and writes about them. And the requirements were basically, you got to know a lot about games. And I knew a lot about games since I'm playing since I can think. And the second thing is you can write academically and understand the monetization mechanics and retention mechanics of games. And I thought, like, yeah, I can do that. I can try. Then they tested me. They gave me a big test. The first game I ever researched and took apart, deconstructed was Farm Hero Saga from King. And that was my test. I wrote like 20 pages about it. They really liked it. And this is how I started as a games researcher there at that company. And that was my starting point of my games career when I was, I think, 22 years old.
That's awesome. So was there any point during that entire process that it felt like kind of daunting to you? Is this really where you're maybe having a little bit of self-doubt from time to time? Or was it like, I can do this like the whole time?
I always have self-doubt. I think to a degree that can be quite healthy. So you stay grounded and you always question your own methods, even up to this state. However, I always thought like, yeah, but I still shouldn't say no. Whenever I see an opportunity, I should not say no, no matter how much of a doubt I have. I will figure it out somehow. And that worked pretty well so far. Also, a lot of failures included, but from every failure I learned. And this is how you just overcome self-doubt eventually.
All right. So let's talk about that like research paper that you did for that role. So you mentioned that it was Candy Crush Saga that you did a bit of research on, talking about in an industry where like research is most of the time sidelined. Why do you think that it is like missing in game development?
Yeah, just to be clear, the first research I ever wrote was about Farm Hero Saga, and later I
I see.
also researched Candy Crush Saga.
All right.
So I believe something really, really important, which a lot of studios out there still don't understand, including the big classic AAA studios and so on, the super professional ones, is seeing a lot of data is nice, but not understanding how to interpret data or what it actually means, that can lead to a lot of wrong decisions. So, and the deconstructing games and understanding how games actually work, understanding how games work in different genres, in different business models, on different consoles or platforms overall, in different countries and markets, that will help you. That will help you answering the why. And it's so important to ask, why is this game successful? Or why is that other game not successful? What happened here? And if you deconstruct games over and over and over again, best in an academic way, and really understand the systems, at some point you see the patterns and you see right away, okay, obviously the KPIs here are bad, the metrics here are bad because of that one thing. And here, this will fly. You already know that in advance because this and that will work together very well. Before even you see the data, you can already predict the future because you have seen this so many times in other games performing well.
I see. I think that's a very like important thing to do even for like indies game developers. How much research about their dream game do you think that they should do just to be able to justify like before they go all in on a project?
Right. I would say the best base you can have for making a game is already being very passionate about a certain type of game, meaning you have played all the Souls-like games there. Out there, you understand all the mechanics, what works and what doesn't work in a Souls-like game, and then you want to build another Souls-like game. That is probably already the greatest research. If you bring the passion, you automatically are part of the whole thing already. You did already do all your research mostly. However, on top of that, writing things down, we easily forget things. Even though we played something 50 times or something, we forget what exactly happened in the first steps I did and so on. How does this system exactly work? Writing down, noting down these things is really, really important, even though you're already a big fan of this type of game. What I also see is there's studios who just start in the games industry for the first time. They actually never have played a lot of games before, a few games. And I think this is where it really becomes a problem. They think they have a really great and nice game idea and they want to make this happen, but they don't have a perspective of what is actually happening on the market because they have played a few games, but not a lot of games. And it's really important to play a lot of games, take notes, understand what's going on there, understand why they are successful, and how we need to be also different or even top that in order to be successful in these crowded markets too. And this is just so important. Understanding games, playing a lot of games, being a player yourself, but also ask yourself from a more professional angle, why do I react like this as a player? That is something every studio needs to do, I think.
Yeah. So next question, like you've helped like major publishers from Korea and Japan adapt their titles to Western markets. So what's the common failure that you see Asian studios commit when they assume like Eastern monetization or the Eastern market or player psychology, when they assume that it will translate directly to Western audiences?
So monetization is especially that works often quite different in Asia in comparison to the West. You have to be more careful in the West usually. Asia also is not one market, obviously. It's different markets and they all work different. Korea, Japan, China, and the Philippines, obviously, it's different user behavior, different perception of things. In the Chinese market, for example, you can straightforward sell expensive items that help players to show off that they are rich, for example. And people will be like, Not in all cases. There's also limits to that, but people will be like, oh wow, that person has a golden shiny piece of equipment that is so expensive. She or he needs to be seems to be rich. That's really cool. If you do the same thing in Europe, people don't appreciate that. People think like, oh, it's just someone who wants to show off with their money. They have no skill. Why can the rich have everything and I can't have anything? That's not fair. It's a really different approach there. So you have to be much softer if it comes to monetization in Europe, in the US, in comparison to many Asian countries. And then also it's you also asked
Go
the
ahead, go
psychology
ahead.
question. Yeah.
No, yeah.
On
I
the
was gonna
psychology
agree.
side, that is something which is something often misinterpreted by studios and publishers. Even the biggest publishers often don't get that psychology is the same all over the planet. We are all having a human brain which works pretty much the same, which focuses on the same motivational factors, but we interpret them in different ways. So maybe my blue is your red or something, for example.
I see.
And therefore the methods, the systems behind that, basically the design back end, you could say, works the same all over the globe. But the way how we present it and how we make it accessible to our different cultural target groups, that is what needs to change only. And I remember in the past, like when I was that intern and became a games researcher, one of the first things we understood was in Asian games, they use gacha methodologies a lot, gacha and stuff. And that was in the West, not a thing at all yet at that time. And our management said, no, that's not going to work in the West. It doesn't make sense. You throw some coins at a machine and there will be a character coming out. That doesn't make sense for Western players at all. We researchers said, yes, that will happen. That will absolutely happen. It makes absolutely sense from a psychological viewpoint, but we need to wrap it differently. And what happened now in the West, we have loot boxes everywhere, which work very similar to...
Which is gacha.
What is a gacha system? Yeah. And even more and more, since we are also in the West, we're getting used to the Asian type of gacha methodology. So it can even look more like the Asian gacha these days. It's more accepted. And it happened. Because we understood the psychology first, we were able to foresee that. But a lot of people still don't understand because it looks different. It looks like something. It doesn't work in the West. But the system works. We just need to make it look different. We have to wrap it differently. But that is from the psychological side.
All right. To add to that, like, have you seen like recent examples of Asian game developers doing well with Western audiences? Do you have like notable examples that you've observed recently?
Yeah, recently Chinese games are becoming really big in the West, especially the higher quality ones. And I also remember there, like 10 years ago, everyone was laughing about Chinese games. Nobody thought like that is any kind of quality that can keep up with a Western AAA game quality. Now, in many cases, it's even better than Western AAA game quality, and then even for free. The Chinese market is really taking over. And that is on both sides, on the free-to-play side, but also on the premium side. They're showing off, putting a lot of resources into these game studios is paying off for them. Korean market is also similar. The Koreans have always been talented if it comes to tech and design work. And now they are finally getting some of their products into the West, like Stellar Blade, for example, also more and more on the free-to-play and online game side. They are doing a really good job. But Koreans already grew together with Western games since they are lovers of Blizzard games for a long time already. So a lot of their concepts already work quite well with the West. They just have been quite shy in the past, I would say, to overcome the barriers it took to actually spread towards the Western markets.
I see. So now let's discuss like a bit of your early career. So early in your career in Good Game Studios, you were part of a team attempting to create one of the first like AAA free-to-play titles, which ultimately failed. So looking back, what was like the fatal flaw that even $40 million in a team of 100 designers could not fix?
Yeah. Whew. It's a long time ago.
All right.
That was the as you say, one of the first AAA games in the free-to-play area. At that time, there was almost no believers that free-to-play games could be AAA-ish. Free-to-play games for real gamers was always like something like mobile games, browser games, something like this. Now we hired a lot of experts experts from all over the world, people from EA, people from Ubisoft, people from Korea as well, from bigger Korean companies who are very experienced. The technical people especially, they were really, really incredibly talented. I learned so much from them. And I was so excited because we have all these talents here now. However, most of these people worked on AAA or AA-ish premium games, pay-to-play games. And they were not believers. They did not understand free-to-play methodologies, even though this company made a lot of money with free-to-play games at that time. But the new people they hired, they didn't understand the depth of engagement mechanics, of retention mechanics, of monetization mechanics. They didn't understand these things. So it was my job and our research job to teach all these veterans of the industry. And we realized they are not open for these things. They thought like, oh, that's not a real game. That's not the cool kind of classic thing I used to know and I always worked on. I won't go with that. And that was number one thing. And the second thing is you hire a bunch of people. I think it was 100 or 150 people almost we put together for this. And they are all super talented, but they have never worked in this team constellation. You build a new team, you need to create so many new processes, you need to form a new culture. It takes a lot of time to get that done. And that was the other struggle we had there. Non-believers and an entirely new team that didn't know how to work together yet.
I see. Non-believers in an entirely new team. But if the same concept would be like created today with a team who's a little bit more experienced with would the same concept, the gameplay that you tried to make back then, would it have worked in this era, like 2025, 2026?
So the core loop, the basic concept of that, it was a AAA PC free-to-play title, we should mention that. And the core concept was really good. It was really nice. You could really see AAA talents passionately worked on this. Just the engagement mechanics, the monetization mechanics were missing. So if we put a team onto this, you can still pull off this core loop experience. Plus, they can add this engagement and the monetization part to it. Yes, this can totally fly. And that specific concept, I haven't seen anything like it up to this day, actually. So I think it could still make it.
Interesting. I hope that somebody brings it back to life or something. Anyway, so you also recently analyzed like the failure of Concord, which is a really good case study. It didn't fail not because of character design or gameplay, but because there's a mismatch between its price point and the MVP approach. So how can a developer's choice of business model lead to that kind of epic fail before they even release a trailer?
Yeah. So this alignment of business model and game or team who's working on the game, I see so many times up to this day with very big publishers. And I mean, in this case, it was Sony behind them, right? Concord was published by Sony, and they did not understand the discrepancy between their chosen business model and the game they are actually making. They were basically making a free-to-play game experience, which was supposed to start off as something like an MVP, which we also saw. There was not a lot of flesh, not a lot of meat to the game yet in the beginning. And it was that bare skeleton of a game, which was fun, which was good. It was even, a lot of people said there's a lot of cool ideas in it. The graphics, the animations were good. You could still argue if you like the character design or not, but it was all very high quality and fun. However, just for a short time, and there's not a lot to do. And for $40, you would get so many more better experiences already at that time, which were much more fleshed out. Up to that point, they already lost $200 million. So it had to fly right away or it's dead. What I would have done, and I would still recommend that to a lot of AAA studios these days, don't put a price tag on this. Release it early, release that early version early, and like an MVP, as in every other free-to-play game, before you lose millions and millions and millions of dollars. Test it, see what people say, and keep improving it. A free-to-play or a service game, a healthy service game sales curve starts down here and then goes slowly up with time. It goes up and up and up, and then it creates momentum with iterations, and it becomes huge. That's how it usually works. A premium game is the opposite. It has a lot of money upfront from all the first day sales or the sales in the first weeks, and then most of the revenue, the money the company already collected, and then after that it declines. It's the exact opposite. What they tried was mixing these two strategies, but the game itself was more like the typical free-to-play strategy. And when you place your game as a premium game, then people will also have premium game expectations. Means IGN will give you a review, for example, and they will review it in accordance to premium game standards. If you release a free-to-play game, in most cases, IGN doesn't care at all. They are like, yeah, whatever, it's just a free-to-play game. We will not review that. And you don't even have any expectations set. Nobody will say this is a bad game. Everyone will say like, okay, it's an early version of a game that is already pretty good. If they keep building that direction, it's going to be great in a few months. So I want to keep playing. And nobody would have complained. It's a totally different expectation angle then. And they messed up that strategy. That's what I would say. They try to mix these two strategies without even realizing. And this is how they set the wrong expectations and couldn't grow the game eventually.
I see.
That's, yeah.
Do you have some recent examples of like maybe indie games that did the like MVP approach quite well recently?
Warframe. You say recently. I'm sorry. Warframe
or
is
not
already
recently.
old by now.
Yeah, Warframe is already old.
But Warframe, think of the Warframe story. That is just perfect. They had from a premium game perspective, a pretty shitty game in the beginning. It was not great. It was just repetitive, always the same missions over and over again with randomized indoor levels. It was fun enough. It was good enough. They built their community. Some people stick to it, not a lot, but they built into that direction the community wanted to see. And they also measured the data and developed the game accordingly. Now they have a huge open world AAA-ish experience with an incredible narrative depth and so on over all these years. And this is the kind of strategy we need if we focus on service games. I understand there's still some service games that are successful with a price tag initially, and then they still build it bigger. This still exists, but then your initial game already needs to fulfill all the expectations that price tags comes with. That Warframe is one of my favorite examples for sure.
All right. Good example. So next up, we worked with Deck 13 on Atlas Fallen, which struggled against like Final Fantasy. So why is like being 70% version of a AAA at 130% of the price? Why is it a recipe for commercial invisibility? And what should they have done instead?
Yeah, Atlas Fallen. I think almost nobody remembers that game. Probably a lot of people saw the trailer.
By name, I on my
Yeah, and that is already the issue. Nobody remembers it. If the campaign was actually comparably big, AA-ish, AAA-ish almost campaign, there was a lot of cool trailers out there, and I'm sure a lot of people said, oh yeah, that's cool, but it didn't stick. Then it released in the same year like Final Fantasy 16, which is already a difficult thing, but I don't think that was a killer year. In my opinion, Atlas Fallen was even better and more fun than Final Fantasy 16. It had a much better game flow. The controls was fun. The system was unique and fun behind it, which is really difficult to see as an outsider when you watch the trailer, but they had a really interesting equipment and ability system. And Final Fantasy 16, I did not enjoy that much, even though I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. What Atlas Fallen did was, as you say, they created a 70% version of something which is like Horizon Zero Dawn. But Horizon Zero Dawn at that time was already much, much cheaper, still had the better graphics, better like uniqueness with all the robots and so on in the world and all these things. And some people even were able to play it for free because I think it was free on the PlayStation Store for some time and such. And so now I have a 70% type of a game I really, really love. And I want to play more of Horizon Zero Dawn. So if there were more games like this, I would love to play them. But I don't want to play something that is like Horizon Zero Dawn, but weaker, especially if it's more expensive at the same time. Because we humans work in a way that we always want to have the next better thing to still feel something. If we get the next worst thing, we don't feel that engagement anymore. And Atlas Fallen did these typical mistakes. And a lot of studios do that mistake. They love Zelda, for example, so they make a Zelda-like game, but it's just not as good as Zelda. And at the same time, it doesn't have anything that makes it unique in comparison to Zelda. Then there is no reason for the players to buy that game when they can also play Zelda. And we are all falling in this trap all the time. If we want to make a 70% copy of a game, more or less, this is fine. But we need at least one very unique feature that you can't get in any other game, the USP, the unique selling point.
Before we move on to the next one, let's dive a little bit into the USP.
Yeah.
The idea of a USP, because what I've observed with a lot of indies is that they would, even if the game is still in like develop, before they even develop things, they were just like conceptualizing things. They already think about features, or a lot of them would think about features, what they could add, what kind of becoming ambitious with what they're trying to make. But the USP is like one like central focus thing about your game. So how do you suggest that in these, what steps could they take to get the fluff of other concept ideas out and just like be able to focus on their USP during conceptualization?
Yeah, in concept phase, you need to understand, obviously, first what will be your USP. It's so important to define that early on, because without that, if you add it later, maybe it just feels like something you added on top and it doesn't really feel like being part of the core concept, right? Well, if you consider from the concept phase on, you will build your entire game around this feature. And if this USP is good and if it works and if it's really unique and people want to try it out by just seeing it in the trailer or something, then it can be really, really powerful. So you have to define your USP by understanding what is there in the market. And there we are a little bit with market research and games research again. You need to play a lot of other games which are similar to your game. And then you can understand what would make your game unique in comparison to these other games. You want to make a platformer game, then play a lot of platformer games, and then understand, okay, these are all cool games, but what is missing here? What could I add that all these games don't have? And how can I show this off in the trailer, for example, or in my pitch deck? And this is how you conceptualize your USP. Doing that early on will be a huge benefit.
I see. So yeah, now we move on to the next section, which is more into your model of success for games. So let's discuss your 4 pillars. So user acquisition, you mentioned them, accessibility, monetization, and engagement. So let's briefly like discuss each one. And then my question here would be like, if a developer is like crushing it in 3, but they're failing it in 1, why does the entire project fail? Why do you need all 4 of these pillars?
Yeah, I mean, we can easily go through that. So you have, let's say you have accessibility, meaning your game can be played by your target audience. Just it's perfectly accessible to them. They have already the console ready to play it. They already know this type of game, so they know the controls and everything. They know this concept already, very accessible to them. Also, you have a very fun game experience. It's really engaging. Your engagement loops work. And you also find the perfect monetization for your game, meaning the perfect price point for your audience, maybe, or the perfect in-game monetization model. So all these things are perfect, but now nobody knows about the game. You don't know how to market your game. You don't know how to let people know that your game exists. That is the user acquisition part. You don't have that, all the rest doesn't matter anymore. You won't be rich. And you can do the same thing with all the other factors. You have user acquisition. You have millions of users who want to play your game. You have great monetization, perfect monetization systems. You have an engaging system. It's a lot of fun to play the game. People would come back, but it's not accessible because you can only play it with a high-end PC, which requires a lot of RAM in 2026.
Which is super expensive.
Then you have the best game ever there, but it's not accessible to your audience. Then that doesn't work either. And then engagement is basically fun. You take the fun out of the game, no matter how great your monetization is, no matter how great, how accessible is user acquisition, the people will just not keep playing it. And then you don't make any money either. And then you have the perfect game, but you have a bad monetization, then you also don't make money. So each of these pillars, and I explain that a lot in my courses, I think you know about that. Each of these pillars is important to master and understand. And then you have the formula for a successful game.
I see. That is like one of the best points about how to make games successful. So let's discuss a little bit about user acquisition, because maybe sometimes this is getting mistaken, or some people would ignore it entirely, because most of the time it's going to be used in mobile or free to play games. But in the context of, like, for example, indie developers making pay to play games, how do they tackle UA? And then when is the right time for them to do UA? And what does user acquisition look like for developers making pay to play games, which is the common indie developer that we have?
Yeah. So something that is important to know about me, I think, is that I use terms that try to be useful for all type of business models and games. I do that because I want to understand the first principle of what makes any kind of game successful. Why do we play games at all and such? As a games researcher, I think this is important. And therefore, I use user acquisition because it just means how to get people to play your game, no matter what business model. This is how I use it. I understand that depending on the industry part you're in, you might use different terms. And user acquisition is mainly marketing for premium games, for pay-to-play games, right? And there, obviously, you have to understand your marketing channels in that case, meaning brand marketing, performance marketing, influencer marketing. These are in my opinion, the three main things you need to understand, figure out the right mix and such. That is mainly the important thing for people to understand as an indie developer when they want to have users in their game. They need to understand the marketing part. If it goes into the free-to-play direction or service game direction, especially on mobile or browser games, performance marketing is going to be more important, while in the premium side of things, the brand marketing will be more important. You have to build the hype with a bigger campaign, with trailers and such. So the approaches are really, really different there, depending on business model and type of game.
I see. So next question, like, you use the concept from urban planning to redefine accessibility. So people would think of accessibility as making a game for that can be played by blind people, or maybe a game that can be played for deaf. But you use a different, like, way to define it. So how does, like, lowering the effort to enjoy a game as the key that unlocks the other three pillars?
I had a big discussion on LinkedIn actually with one person who is working on accessibility features for the type of people you just mentioned. And he hated it that I used this term accessibility for a much broader audience. But I have a different design approach. And I believe, again, this is my first principle researcher thinking. I believe if we all think more, if we believe accessibility is for everyone, then we will consider also everyone, including blind people, for example, right? And this is what the curb cut effect also says. We built the curb cuts outside at the street, initially maybe to help wheelchair drivers to also be able to participate in the traffic life out there. But it also helps very skilled people like the skateboarder or the people who does the daily deliveries and so on. So all these professional people or more skillful people, it helps them too. And that is a curb cut effect. If we only design something for blind people and we don't consider the rest, then maybe this is good for that one particular target audience, but then maybe it also becomes a burden for the others. If we design something that considers the blind people and is at the same time good for everyone else, that is the perfect feature, in my opinion. It's more difficult to approach things this way, but it works in many occasions. And that is also my design philosophy. I will try every feature I build. I try to make it as accessible as I can with the tools I have in front of me. That doesn't mean dumbing it down. That doesn't mean making it less deep or less complexity. It just means that this complexity becomes easier to access for everyone. For people who don't know how to use a controller, maybe for people who can't afford the high-end PC. So we maybe create a mobile version of that game too. And for people also who just don't have that much time in the day. This is how I use that much time in the day to play video games, because they have to take care of their children, or they have to maybe lead a company or anything. And making it accessible to all these people too potentially makes it a better experience for other people as well. This is my design approach.
All right. So next up, let's talk about like motivation. So you replace the vague word fun with an acronym ARC, which is autonomy, relatedness, and competence. So let's start with autonomy and with one of my favorite games actually, but not at the start. So why was No Man's Sky considered empty at launch despite having like virtually limitless planets, and then GTA is gonna feel full with just one city?
Yeah, that was so interesting at that time. When they released the trailers of No Man's Sky, the first ones, everyone was so excited. They thought like, wow, there's so huge, trillions of planets. I can just go anywhere, do whatever I want. That gives us the expectation of high autonomy. I can do anything in this game. But choices just simply don't matter at all. They don't engage us if they don't have impact to them. Yes, I could go to any kind of planet in No Man's Sky, in the initial version of No Man's Sky, but it doesn't matter which planet I go to because I find kind of the same resources on pretty much all the planets in the beginning, especially. And it's totally pointless. It's a pointless decision. So decision making itself doesn't make us happy, it doesn't engage us. We still feel limited in what we can do. In GTA, on the other hand, every micro decision matters. You are walking now. Now you could make the decision to steal a car. That will make you much faster. So it's an important decision to make, but with the downside that, oh, maybe you're doing something bad. So the cops might follow you after that, might chase you down. And then you're in the car. Everything went well now. Great. But now how do you drive? Do you drive careless and fast, but you might also hit other people while doing so? Or will you be a little bit more careful? When you hit other people, it's another in-game crime. Police might chase you down, up to the point that they follow you with all the military they got, and they maybe put you in jail and you lose all your weapons or money or so. So there are consequences to all the actions you're doing in GTA. It's not about putting a lot of cars and people and stuff or animals or whatever in there. Not at all. It's much more about the decisions you're making and how impactful they are, even these micro decisions. This is autonomy about what's autonomy is about.
Right. So going back to No Man's Sky, which is now hailed as like one of the like best, which is now a fan favorite, one of the best sci-fi games out there. So what did they do to change that? To change that very bad launch, and now it's really one of the best games, sci-fi games out there.
Yeah, they have, first of all, they had a massive budget to correct this huge publicity disaster backed by Sony at that time. So we have to consider that. However, we can still use it as a learning for indie studios as well. The first version of a game you release, even though it's bad, doesn't need to mean that it's over. For a premium game, usually it's more over than it would be for service or free-to-play game, because then you have more chances to build into other directions and iterate. Luckily, No Man's Sky is basically a service game. So they had all these opportunities to change things, to listen to the community, to measure the data as well. They had a lot of time to improve it. Eventually, it's very similar to the Warframe scenario, just that they didn't start small and then build it bigger. It's more like they already started way too big, usually would go bankrupt if they weren't backed by a lot of money. But then they had the chance just to build into the right directions by understanding what the motivations of the people are. And if we talk about the motivations, we just actually can again talk about these three factors of the psychology: autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And they put just more of that into the game. And then it felt much more like fulfilling now. And now it really matters what you do in the game, what paths you take, how you interact with other players, which wasn't possible initially, and so on.
I see. So now let's talk about like relatedness. So you've shown that looking into someone's eyes for 5 seconds is going to trigger a physical reaction. So how do you translate that human need into like non-social relatedness with artificial characters, like for example in FF7?
Yeah, relatedness is so important for humans. We work together all the time. This is also the reason why we're here. We work together. We want to build knowledge. We want to share it with other people. It's essential for human evolution. In the experiment you mentioned, I love to do that in my workshops, right? So people should just look at each other and then just understand what's happening in our brains at that moment. And we immediately have that strong reaction just by being in the same room with another person. And in games, we can create something similar, even though obviously with multiplayer games, that's very easy. But the non-social relatedness is something only media can create, artificial relatedness, basically. You have another character in the game. And if there's a story or narrative or lore in the game, it's always channelized through the character. And this is how you connect with the characters. Your brain thinks almost like this is another human being. And that's why this is important for us and matters for us. And we are getting engaged with this. Now, there's some very simple methods to already create some relatedness and engagement to feel with that character in the game. We see often in mobile game especially that the chibi art style, meaning the heads of the characters in some RPGs, maybe mobile RPGs, are bigger in comparison to the body size. So this kind of chibi art style has one big benefit, for example. You can show the face, big eyes, big mouth, big everything, big emotions. You can show them very closely to the screen, even though it's a small mobile screen. And this is also one reason why this potentially performs better than characters on a small mobile screen where you can't see the faces very well. It's harder to connect with them. And this is just kind of this looking into the eyes moment just on a small mobile game. Make the heads big, make the emotions clear, and there you have some relatedness already.
All right, that is very interesting. I think it also like what do you call that effect? Like if you put eyes on just everything, it suddenly becomes like more relatable to the player. I
The
think there's some
googly eyes.
study, yeah, like
Yeah.
googly eyes and everything.
Yeah.
All right. So next up,
Absolutely.
let's talk about like competence. So why do you say that players feel just as competent beating a level in Candy Crush as they do when they defeat a boss in Dark Souls?
Right. So let's understand how it feels to defeat a boss in Dark Souls. Most of the time, I would argue, we don't defeat the boss in Dark Souls, a boss in Dark Souls, first try. We have to come again and again and again to finally beat that boss at some point. And then usually with every time trying, we improve somehow. We get stronger, we learn the patterns of the boss. We have some progression that is either within the game, extrinsically in the game, or intrinsically in our brain. And our brain means we improve our dodging skill or we learn the patterns and so on. Our brain works, it creates connections, it grows while we're doing that. This is a huge factor in human motivation and one of the basic things why we even created games and play in the first place. And in Dark Souls, you have that effect when you beat the boss. You finally feel so great about it. You feel like, yes, I finally made it because I become better. I have learned and now I'm better. This is beating the boss is basically the feedback for the brain that you have improved, you have learned. And that is what our brain craves for. In Candy Crush Saga, there's a couple of levels which are quite easy to beat. You have a good flow. You beat level by level by level. Then there's new mechanics introduced. You learn these new mechanics, then you beat the next levels. And then suddenly there is a really difficult level. These days, it's even marked with a skull, I think. Something that shows off that this level is really difficult. So your expectation is already, oh, that's going to be a difficult level. They let you fail. They let you fail. They let you fail, just like the boss in Dark Souls. You keep failing. But in Candy Crush Saga, before they realize you get too frustrated and you might churn and stop playing, they will actually let you win. You don't realize that. You can't see how they let you win. But when they let you win, you believe it was your own doing. Your brain, this is again the feedback for your brain that you did great, you have learned, you became better. And this is what our brain craves for. And the psychology is exactly the same like a Dark Souls, but even more accessible, which is one important success factor. Yes, Candy Crush is more successful than Dark Souls. And not only more accessible, but also even stronger because they exactly, thanks to all the data, they exactly know the perfect point in time for almost every player out there when that player should win, to enjoy that moment as much as possible. So Candy Crush Saga, if it comes to competence, I would argue is even stronger than Dark Souls.
That is an interesting take. For indies to apply this to their own games, is it just simply about like following the flow theory like by Mieli, or is there deeper science or framework behind it that they could follow?
Yeah, well, the term competence is originated in the self-determination theory by Ryan and Deci, and the flow theory by the person you just mentioned, and I will always fail to pronounce that name properly, so I won't even try.
All right.
So these are different theories made by people at different times, and they were not collaborating at that time. But they describe a very similar thing. This is why I love to bring the competence factor in connection with the flow theory, because it's basically the same. The flow theory goes a little bit deeper with the explanation that there's a skill floor and a skill ceiling, and we need to keep people into that channel. And that is what Candy Crush is better at in comparison to Dark Souls. Dark Souls can be too frustrating for a lot of players, while Candy Crush is just keeping everyone, casual players and hardcore players, into that flow channel very well. So this is how these are connected, and it's almost the same. There might be some details different, but it works very well together, the competence factor and the flow theory.
All right. So let's move on to the next one. So the over justification effect. So this is a major fail for many live ops games. So why does like over rewarding players with login bonuses, achievements, and etc. Why does it destroy like the intrinsic desire to play?
This is eventually a very deep one, because almost none of us, especially the ones who are grown, who are born and grown into a capitalist society, for them it's really, really difficult to understand that rewards, external rewards like money, or even when the parents say, "Oh, you did great, you did awesome," or grades at school, these things diminish or undermine our intrinsic motivation to perform a task. Yes, we will study hard to get good grades, but we will stop studying these subjects as soon as the grades are gone, which is actually against human nature, because our brain loves to learn and to improve. That is a competence factor of human intrinsic motivation. An extrinsic factor, rewarding us for the same task, will make us less intrinsically motivated to keep doing this task when the reward is gone. And that's also a reason why it could be, I'm not an expert, I don't even have children, I'm not an expert on that, but it could be better not to tell your children you did great, but instead to tell them, I can see you put a lot of hard work into this, and this is why this result is great now. Focus on the path they took intrinsically, rather than just giving a point for the result. Might keep them more passionate about certain topics, might keep them working on things even though there is no reward for it eventually. And in games, it's the same thing. The external rewards, prizes, login bonuses undermine your intrinsic motivation. Most of you listening to this have had that experience. You play a free-to-play game that has a login bonus, maybe Duolingo. A lot of people use Duolingo. That has a login bonus, the strike system. And then the reason why you come back on a daily basis is because of that reward. And maybe you have even heard other people say it or said it yourself. Actually, I only come back to pick up my reward, and then you log out again. So enjoying the game fun, the game engagement is gone. You can still come back daily, but you don't really learn on Duolingo anymore. You only do the necessary 5 minutes and you stop. Initially, you did 1 hour of learning or even more on Duolingo when you were still passionate about it, when there was intrinsic motivation. That one is destroyed by the strike. And this is what we have to understand about ourselves. These extrinsic rewards, they destroy our passion and motivation, sometimes even make us depressive, because we don't have the intrinsic motivation and passion anymore to play, to learn, to study, or to live even. And in games, we have to apply this too. We can destroy our game economies over longer periods of time by giving out too much bonuses and login bonuses specifically, or other external rewards. The thing is, the big issue in the company is the product managers still show off great KPIs, great stickiness factor, because people keep coming back every day. But what do they do every day? They don't do a lot anymore. They don't pay into the game anymore, neither with their time nor with their money. And that you only realize after 2 or 3 years after you have implemented the login bonus. Maybe if you're lucky, after a few months already. But at that time, everyone already thinks that product manager did a great job, because initially it increased the KPIs, the metrics. But on the long run, it will decrease. I promise you that.
I see. I want to do a segue on something similar about this topic. So gamification. So there's a lot of like companies would do like gamification of their products and services.
Yeah.
Having this like this effect, like using wrapping usage of a product or service around points. What can these companies like learn from games to make those like points rewards things better?
Yeah. That is a big issue. In my opinion, gamification is totally misunderstood. Gamification often is seen as we look at other games out there, see what kind of systems they have, and we try to kind of superficially implement them into our system as well. We should rather understand the actual psychology behind games. Why do we love playing games? Why are we so passionate about games? And implement that into other things like fitness or learning. And I use fitness tools like this myself. And I use something called the e-gym back in Germany. The e-gym also is giving you points for participating, shows you on the screen how you should move and stuff. But I see so much potential to improve this. If we focus instead of these extrinsic factors on the 3 factors of intrinsic motivation, autonomy, relatedness, and competence, we will design very different features. Maybe we don't even need points at all. Points are okay as a feedback to show, yes, you have achieved this and that. But the focus should be on relatedness, building a community or doing something for other people while doing this thing, like teams, as for example. There's something, maybe you're aware, I think, what is it called again? Hyrox, I think. The Hyrox system is 2 people try to do different fitness approaches, different fitness disciplines together, and they have to work together. If one person is too weak, the other person has to compensate for that. So meaning they are always, due to the relatedness factor, they are always fighting together and they are always motivated to do things together, not for points or anything, but just for not letting the other person down. And that is a huge motivator. That is gamification, in my opinion, focusing on the psychology of games instead of just focusing on the UI interface and the feedback of games.
Okay, quick pause because this is super relevant to what we're talking about. So, most of us have this fear. You spend 3 years building your dream game in stealth mode. You're gonna hit publish on Steam and then absolute silence. You've wasted your time, your money, and your reputation on a bet that nobody actually wanted to play. So, this is why exactly we built Ludo Launchpad. We take out the guesswork and stop you from building in the dark. We help you validate your game before you burn your next year of runway. If you've been sitting on a concept, a prototype, or even an idea that you can explain in one sentence, go ahead, pitch it to Ludo Launchpad at pitch.ludolaunchpad.com. That is pitch.ludolaunchpad.com. Pitch us your game, and let's turn that uncertainty into validation. All right, back to the episode. So, let's go to the next part, which is first one about money, the money sponge monetization. So you described monetization as a sponge with a high surface area. So how can developers build so that it feels like voluntary value, like rather than a paywall?
Yeah, sponge. Wait, give me one moment. I got something for you.
Sponge. So you
I have an
a
actual
sponge right
sponge.
there.
Yeah,
Nice.
maybe I even have water here. So
Nice.
what happens now when I put this here? My pants are wet. That's what happens. But the sponge, obviously, it sucks in all the water. How does that happen? We learned that in physics class. This happens due to surface area, because there's a lot of holes and little tunnels inside the sponge, and the water sticks to surfaces overall. And since there's a lot of surface area inside the sponge, it has a lot of area docking stations to stick to. And this is exactly what money has to do in games as well. For great monetization systems, we have to create all these tunnels and holes. So only one way to access the monetization system is not very powerful. If there's only one spot where you can pay into, making it more indirect and giving people more opportunities to spend money instead of just one way where they have to pay $100, put a station here where people spend 50 cents, another station here where people spend 30 cents, and so on. A lot of these small things that has several psychological advantages. For example, it doesn't feel like I spent a lot of money. It feels like I only spent a little bit here, or then I can also spend a little bit there. Also, this barrier is lower. The accessibility of spending is higher. And it also doesn't feel like it's going to be pay to win, because there's not one thing I can buy and then I win. If I really wanted to win by paying, then I need to pay here and there and over there and over there and over there. And then maybe at some point, eventually, I would win by spending, but it doesn't feel like it because it's by far not that direct. These are the reasons why a sponge like that, a money sponge, makes a lot of sense. And the most powerful monetization systems out there, of the games that make $1 million per day in revenue, they use these kind of systems usually.
Yeah, I remember my experience. Like I play King Shot, and like there's a lot of places there where it's inviting you to spend. So additional question to this one, like especially if we're thinking about like, pay to play games, the ones that you buy, and then the community somehow have a like love-hate relationship with DLCs. How do you make those like DLCs feel like they got something out of it, like rather than having it look like blatant, like squeezing money as much as possible from people? How do you frame that DLC to so that it's full of value for the player?
Yeah. When you say DLC, a DLC can be interpreted in many different ways. So maybe you want to specify.
Probably like the common idea of DLCs, the like you buy the main game, the main base game, and then there's all these different things that you need to buy as well to enjoy the main game. So yeah, how do you frame that into something that it's not milking the player but adds more value on top of the game?
I mean, if it were like a content DLC, which is basically a few more hours of gameplay with a new scenario or something, I think this
More
is
like
mostly considered as really, really fair by players. If it's becoming more like items, costumes, or sword or something you can buy via DLC, I think that is actually just a relic out of old times, since DLCs originally came from a time where we didn't really have in-game purchases possible, meaning we had to go to Steam or to the PlayStation Store to buy that one weapon so I can use it in the game. As soon as it's an item within the game to buy, it's basically the same. It's like a DLC, but we wouldn't call it DLC anymore, right? I think this type of thing, if you want to create a DLC where you sell weapons or something like this, somehow as an in-game item, that will make more sense. If we try to sell these weapons in the PlayStation Store, that's not really effective usually. So some of these platforms still causes a little bit of trouble selling these things properly. That's again a little bit of product strategy. Do we really want to do these kind of DLCs when we release our game only on the Nintendo Play Store, for example, in the Nintendo Store, for example? Maybe not. If it's a fair value DLC, you get so and so much more game for this and this much money, then a lot of people appreciate it often. However, I see it as outdated thing to do overall. This type of traditional DLCs, these days it makes much more sense to update your game, have iterations, have added to your game for all the players, and then find better ways to monetize it rather than this hard paywall, and give people a reason to get back into your game, maybe for free to test out this new area and stuff, and then figure out how to monetize it from there. That potentially gets you more players in, and more players means also more players you can monetize.
All right. What's an example of a game that you've played that does this pretty well? Does the content behind the paywall pretty well?
Potentially, we could just mention regular service games like the game with the bugs. Oh my god, Helldivers. Helldivers 2.
Helldivers, okay.
They keep adding content. Fortnite is doing the same thing. They keep adding content, keep adding new areas, keep adding a lot of story and narrative behind it as well, and they find ways to monetize that then. But basically, you get all this extra DLC stuff. It doesn't feel like DLCs, but it's basically like DLCs for free. And then they are monetizing along with these things.
All right. So now you mentioned pay to win earlier, so let's get into that one. So you said that pay to win is the most powerful monetization method, but only if it's invisible. So how do you design a system like that where the player wins in their brain socially, but without being labeled evil by the community.
Yeah. People hate me for this.
It is a
For another
controversial
thing,
take.
For two things, I already said that when I talked about the money sponge, people will hate that it sounds really evil. The methodologies I talk about often sound evil. I still believe we need to use them in the proper and ethical way. I'm teaching the tools because I know that these things work. That doesn't mean we should use them also with full power, right? So, and if it comes to pay to win, what I'm seeing when I analyze the market, and this is not difficult, just look at the most successful games in terms of daily revenue, and you will see it. Many of the most successful games, almost all of them, actually, if we are honest with ourselves, have pay to win in them. And then it's also a definition of what pay to win is. And it's really difficult to define because there's people who define pay to win differently than other people. It's more like an unfair feel. As soon as people feel unfair, something is unfair, they would label it pay to win. But it's really difficult to pinpoint when someone feels something is unfair. And what I have learned, the games that technically are pay to win, of course, if you just you are a millionaire and you can just buy infinite stuff in the game, you definitely have huge advantages. But the game still doesn't feel like pay to win. Is it then pay to win or is it not? So it's really difficult to say. And what I've learned is the games which are very good at hiding, at doing pay to win, but hiding it at the same time, they're doing it by creating this money sponge, making it very indirect. One game example would be the strategy games you play on mobile. You have maybe 100 member alliances. So you have to work together with 99 other players in one alliance. If one player is rich and pays everything for themselves, then maybe they are outmaxed, but that will not make the entire alliance win automatically. They still have to strategize against another 100 people alliance. They still need to talk about how to use these richness resources. And eventually, nobody will really see that one player spent a lot of money, and because of that, this alliance is stronger. For this, all the alliance members cumulatively would have to pay and would have to max out their castles or something. So on top of that, each of these castles has so many ways to do a payment. You can spend some money here to improve this building. You can spend some money there to improve the troops, or something there to activate the VIP mode, and so on. So it's just so many different ways to spend the money, and none of these alone will make you win. All together, and if also the whole alliance together spends and becomes more powerful together, then yes, it's pay to win. But it's so indirect and so hidden that nobody sees that. And that is the rocket science of hidden pay-to-win monetization, which is the most powerful monetization I am seeing on the market.
I see. Actually, that reminded me of something like I mentioned before. I play King Shot, and before that, Clash of Clans. Most of the time in these games, like you have like 1, 2, 3 whales in your alliance or your clan if you're lucky, because the mechanics are intertwined between you, and then there are like micro mechanics alongside of it. What's happening is that, and I think indies should know this as well. There are different tiers of payers in a game, like low spenders, mid spenders, high spenders, and then the whales. And I think having a good understanding of that as well would be critical into like getting success from monetization in games like these. All right. Next one. People think virality is marketing, but you say it's design based on 3 factors: showing off relevant information and oddity. So speaking of oddity, so how did Lethal Company use oddity to achieve like massive organic growth?
Yeah. So virality overall as a term, I think it can be anything. It doesn't need to be marketing. It doesn't need to be design, but it can be both or anything else that makes the game spreading virally, obviously. But I think it is an issue that people often only think of it as viral marketing. It can be so much more. And designers actually have the job to, with every feature they create, consider virality too. With these 3 factors, what you said, showing off, important information, and oddity. Lethal Company has oddity all over its place. How did the designers design this oddity into the game? Well, just look at the monsters already, the creativity they used to put into the monsters, or are they called monsters in Lethal Company? You know what I mean, right? The subjects, whatever they're called. They just look so interesting already. Just this, because of this, just go on YouTube and see, type in funny moments, Lethal Company. You will see all these funny monsters coming up, popping up, behaving in strange, weird ways. You don't know why. That feels so odd and weird and eerie. And then in combination with the team dynamics and how people react towards these monsters and interact with these monsters, there's so much potential for new, odd, and funny situations. That is the oddity factor. I don't know if that was planned from the designers, but you can definitely initiate a design like that. You can have the intention to put a lot of odd and funny situations into the game. And therefore, your design will also turn out differently in a way that is more shareable, in a way that is more interesting for people to share.
All right. With the recent meta game of marketing in indie games being focused on influencers and micro influencers, is designing a viral game more important than ever with these new landscape of influencers and micro influencers in the game? And if it is, would non-viral types of mechanics, do they still have a place in the modern games landscape?
The thing is, obviously, virality is a gamble. It's not a science. So all we can do is we can increase the chance for virality with the design and with the marketing as well. Virality basically means people share it with as many other people around them as possible. And this is exactly what the influencers do as well. So meaning you optimize for virality. That also means the influencers have more interesting things to share. People who watch, the followers, they have more potential clips to clip and then again to share with others. And yeah, this is exactly how it works. Consider that with every design feature you're creating, no matter if it's a solo player RPG or multiplayer kind of team game, it doesn't matter. But if you consider that, the chances that people share that stuff and it becomes viral are just much, much higher. So these three factors, showing off relevant information and oddity. My YouTube content goes a little bit more in detail into what that means. But yeah, I can only suggest you always consider that with your design.
All right. Another thing, is there like a framework or a method that indie developers could follow if they want to make their gameplay more viral?
Well, paying as much into these accounts I just mentioned, right? I have not created a framework. I don't know another framework than this. So, but what I can do is I can mention examples of features that would pay into these accounts. Like showing off means everything that helps me to show off what a cool and awesome person I am, what a skillful person I am. That could be a time attack mode or speed run mode in a game, or a very difficult challenge that really only the best can beat. And this is what I would share with others when I actually made it. Relevant information means like there's a very difficult puzzle to solve in the game, and I have no idea how that works. Or mechanic, which is kind of a hidden mechanic. I know I triggered it, but I don't know how. Or just some important parts, maybe hidden story elements and so on. This is stuff people love to share because it's hidden. So the only way to figure it out is maybe checking out the internet. And if I want to check it out on the internet, there will be other people who will write it on the internet for me. That encourages them to write these things on the internet. If the game tells you everything, then there's no reason why I would actually put it on the internet. And oddity, well, the things we just talked about. Strange, weird, funny things, bugs, glitches as well. And this is basically my framework.
All right. Interesting. So next up, let's talk about like narrative design, the carpenters versus cathedral builders. So in narrative design, you suggested that AI will replace the carpenters, but it's going to empower the cathedral builders. What does this mean for the narrative designers, and what would it mean to narrative designers who would refuse to adapt to the changes in technology and AI?
I believe that actually happens with every technology and every kind of development, not only in AI. We get better tools. That means we can focus on the bigger picture. And this is also why nobody of us knows anymore how to hunt or how to survive in nature, because we don't need to do these things anymore. We can now focus on the bigger picture and do other more strategic things. We were carpenters before, and now we're cathedral builders, as you say. And it's a narrative design, especially with AI, also with other tools, but especially with AI. This is also going to change a lot of things. It enables us to focus on the bigger picture, create bigger stories, more of things. That doesn't mean it's at the same time worse quality. That really depends. But we orchestrate more of the things instead of writing every single word ourselves. And that can be used as a big chance. And we can be really creative on that new level of cathedral building or architecture in other ways. So we can give players more freedom also to play around within, not only lead them a certain narrative path and not only guide them through that path, but also allow them to move within a narrative open world, basically. Meaning maybe I can say the one thing or the other thing, and not only 2 or 3 decisions, but a million of different decisions. But the narrative designer would still have to orchestrate how much of decision freedom can be given at that point when talking to that particular character. So that is a huge chance of new type of games. And I know it's hard for us to imagine that this can be enjoyable, but there are some game examples where this is already very enjoyable. I think one of the latest one where nobody thought they would enjoy it that much, but they enjoyed a lot now. Now I forgot the name of the game. It's an MMORPG, free-to-play Chinese one, just released recently. I want to know the name now. No RPG. I forgot the name. Sorry. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Where Winds Meet. Where Winds Meet.
Where Winds Meet.
And that one is really, really big right now. It just released a few weeks ago. And you can talk to some of the characters. These are AI conversations. And usually a lot of people now, a lot of people would say that's AI slop. I don't like that stuff. I don't want to have that in my games. However, when they actually experience it and when it's well designed, people love it. People create content about that, like what kind of stories they have experienced with these characters and so on. But it also needs a builder, right? A cathedral builder, making sure this is orchestrated well, that this works in a good way, and the characters only know this and that much, or can only be pursued to do this and that, but not that one. So we still need the narrative design. It's still the important core, no matter if we use the AI or not. And if narrative designers refuse to use AI in the future, then it's just like as if a mathematician refuses to use a calculator. This is how I see it. It can work. It's fine. That mathematician can still do the math, and probably enjoy it, maybe do also really cool, nerdy things in that micro level of math, but the demand for that might decline with time.
I see. Are there any like AI tools out there that you think would give the biggest advantage to narrative designers today?
I'm not a narrative designer myself, so I have to say I'm not using a lot of narrative design tools. I do know of a company, a good friend, a very talented narrative designer. He is directing that company, and it's called Arda AI, AARDA AI. And that one apparently has some very interesting features also for narrative designers. Maybe you want to check out that one.
That would be worth checking out. What was it again? Arda?
Yeah, Arda AI. Yes, AARDA.
That is something we're checking out. So yeah, we're down to the final stretch. So let's talk about like the benchmark 80 and innovate 20 rule. So you often advise studios to benchmark 80% of their design and then innovate on 20%. So it's kind of like similar to the Pareto principle. So can you explain to us a bit more? Is it different from the Pareto principle, or is it pretty much like more so the same?
It is pretty much that. It still needs some elaboration, I think. So I have been working on a lot of innovative projects. And innovation for a lot of companies means we just allocate some budget to do anything. I realized that barely works. People come up with crazy ideas because they have the budget, so they just do anything with that budget. And it doesn't make any sense. There was no research behind that. It was just trying to do something new for the sake of doing something new. But from a research perspective, I often saw like that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't follow the rules of the psychology, of the accessibility, and so on. So this is even a worse product than anything else that has been there. depending on based on these first principle. I also like to call them the natural laws of the games industry. So you have to follow certain laws. There's no way around them. If you just try to innovate like crazy and you miss these laws, then you can already foretell the future. It's not going to work. So, however, what we can do is we use a certain core that works. And this is basically almost everything we're doing. Nothing we create is entirely new. We always create things based on what we know. And if you want to have a sustainable business, at least, I would really suggest focus on a common base that everyone understands and has been there before, but add something, a twist, a feature, or something that changes up all that proven stuff.
All right, that makes sense.
That's basically my explanation for that. Yeah,
I see. How about for indie devs? If they're going to apply this principle in their like day to day, what should they like focus their like 20% on? How do they put that 20% of innovation, 80% of benchmark? How do they put that in the like everyday operations of a team working on an indie game?
Obviously, this is not that easy to quantify. I mean, you could quantify over budgets or the amount of people working on the innovation part and the non-innovation part, but it's really, really tough to do it this way. It's as a small indie team or maybe even solo developer, it is a little bit more of a guts feel. Take a concept that already exists and try to add this bit of innovation that really sounds unique and interesting to people and improves things. Should always focus on two things: the piece of innovation, it should be unique, and it should pay into the engagement account. So basically, if you want so, the three factors of human intrinsic motivation, autonomy, relatedness, and competence.
All right. So next up, you said the studio has only like 7 seconds to convince an audience of their USP. So are there like steps that the developer can take to like summarize their core into like tell their core to a not so smart friends in one sentence? Is there like a surefire way to do that or something?
Yeah, that is, I just released a Udemy course on that topic, very short 1 hour course, but after that, everyone will understand how to build your perfect USP. Small part of that, I'm saying exactly what you're saying. Imagine you're on the schoolyard as a kid, as a teenager, you just played a really, really cool game and you think this game is so awesome, you want to convince your best schoolyard friend as well of this game to play it. What would you tell them? You will not tell them this is an epic story about a hero who beats a dragon or anything like this. You will say rather something like, it's basically like Super Mario, but with a lot of deep strategy elements in it. So you have to play it. It's really cool. And then your friend will understand. Your friend understands Super Mario, and your friend understands the twist, deep strategy elements, and things like, that sounds interesting. How does it work? Maybe there will be a follow-up question. So, extremely simple. In less than 7 seconds, your not so smart friend or schoolyard friend understands what's going on, and it creates curiosity. This is what you need to achieve. And this phrase you're using here, this little sentence, easy to understand sentence, use it for your professional pitch deck. I'm currently working on another course, which is about pitch decks, by the way. And I also mentioned that. Mention that in your pitch deck. Put that in the first 7 seconds of your trailer, not necessarily saying that you need to use that sentence in the first 7 seconds, but your visuals or the music or whatever have to show this off somehow in the first 7 seconds. This is the game like. It's a platformer like Super Mario, but with strategic elements, something like that. And then people get it, they're curious, they will watch the whole trailer, they will share it with their friends. That's what you need to do and to achieve.
All right. So last question before we move on to our closing remarks. So you use the game journey to teach a lesson about like companionship and free energy. In this industry that's prone to burnout, what lessons from there can indie teams apply to be able to survive this coming year, 2026?
Yeah. So Journey is one of my favorite games of all time. And it's a piece of art. And it's a little bit of a spoiler here. So be careful.
Okay.
There you see another character from time to time in Journey. And the game doesn't tell you anything about that other character. You might even be surprised that there is other characters in that game. And Journey is it doesn't have a lot of game elements. It's not very deep in its mechanics, very easy to learn and accessible as well. And the game also almost doesn't use any words at all to communicate the story and such. You experience the story through the game itself and the gameplay. You see another character, you can just ignore them or you can interact with them. The secret here is that the other character is an actual player, at least if you're connected online. It automatically spawns another player into your world. You can jump in Journey. You have a jumping mechanic and even a flying mechanic when you collect energy. But collecting energy, you can only get at certain points and you don't get a lot of it. So you can only fly for a very short time. When you are with another player, when another player is next to you, you automatically provide each other with energy. So together, you can fly infinitely for as long as you stick to each other and stay next to each other, right away next to each other, almost touch each other. And knowing about human psychology, I know this is actually very, very similar. Humans, by only being with each other, just looking at each other, smiling at each other, or saying a nice word, that provides us energy. That makes us feel so good. Sometimes we say something like, you made my day because you did something nice, even just a small thing. And Journey shows us exactly that thing. This working together, being with each other can give us a lot of energy. And I believe that's exactly what we need to go through times like these where the economy isn't the greatest and we have a lot of conflict in the world. That is what Journey teaches us.
All right. So, and with that, we go to our little short quick fire round. What game do you find that you're recommending to people most of the time and why that game?
Most of the time, like all time or at the moment?
All time. Yeah, all time.
Ooh, that's a difficult one.
That is a hard question. I know.
Every year I have another game to recommend. If it comes to all time, I think maybe that would be Undertale.
Interesting choice. Yeah.
Yes, Undertale eventually. That is I would though only recommend it to a certain type of person, especially people who have played a lot of games and RPGs before. And then, I can only say this is a huge piece of art. And at some point, you're not sure anymore if you were playing the game or if the game plays you, which is great. If you had said recent game, it would be Expedition 33 or Alan Wake 2.
Yes, that is a good game. That is a very good game. All right.
I just recently talked to Jennifer, the narrative designer of Expedition 33, and she's an awesome person, and I'm just happy that they won so many awards.
Awesome. And then next one, what is the most head-scratching moment that you had while playing a game?
Kojima games.
Most
likely
games.
Why? Kojima games. And I'm not even sure if I can pinpoint one exact moment, but let's say Metal Gear Solid 4, when I was able to beat bosses which are based on very beautiful real-world female models. And then when you beat them, you get into a weird kind of room with them. And if you actually take out your camera, they will pose in interesting ways in a catsuit-like uniform they are wearing. And so I love Kojima games for a lot of things, but there's a few things which I find very head-scratching.
All right, that's interesting. And with that, it was a very insightful conversation. So just quick takeaways. One, for many indie game developers, play lots of games, learn from those games, deconstruct those games so that you'll be able to make better games. And also doing the MVP approach to be able to avoid a failure like Conquered, learning from your audience is really important no matter what game you're working on. And then working on the 4 pillars, UA, accessibility, monetization, engagement will really help you get your game really successful. All right. And with that, thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us here. And we hope to see you again. All right.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lots of fun.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. We hope you liked that episode. If you learned something valuable from this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone building a game right now. If you want to dive deeper and learn about Patrick's game success strategies, head over to patrickrose.io and check out his YouTube channel. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/GameDevEpicFails. That is patreon.com/GameDevEpicFails. Your support helps us keep the podcast running and turn real lessons into tools that reduce wasted years for indie game developers. And if you're building an early stage game and you want proof of an audience before you commit years of work, pitch your game at pitch.ludolaunchpad.com. That is pitch.ludolaunchpad.com. See you in the next episode. Thank you.